Hello Rockstars, Gargudon here, and welcome back to the Rockstars On The Road podcast. Today's episode is a bit of a special one as we today are marking 10 years of Grand Theft Auto V. It feels slightly unreal that one of the most iconic and legendary titles in video game history is already a decade old. Joining me for this is content creator and YouTuber James, also known as LazerzZ. Say hi and tell the audience a little about what you do.
Yeah, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's good to be here. I make currently long-form video essay style stuff, analysing video games, sometimes touching into movies and TV shows and things like that, but primarily gaming. I have a long history of covering Assassin's Creed, I try to take myself in new directions, but currently that's what I'm doing, that's what I'm at. Recently put out a big video on GTA 5 for that 10-year anniversary, so I'm interested to sit down and talk about it. It's going to be fun.
It is indeed, and that is why you came to mind for this one. I quite enjoyed that video. And you said you started out doing a lot of Assassin's Creed stuff, and that is how the two of us got acquainted back in the day as well. So it is indeed.
Yeah, which we did do. It was one of your old shows, right? Which was Assassin's Creed focus. You had me on that, and we had a little chat. That was that was nice back in the day.
Assassin's Creed was something else.
Yeah, for sure. Back when I was super into it back then. It was nice to chat with you about it too.
Of course. But that was then. Now we are talking about one of the best video games of all time that still holds up to this date, no doubt. So with all intros and such out of the way, let's go to Los Santos and dive right into this retrospective look at this legendary game. So first off, what are some of your favorite elements about GTA 5 in terms of, among other factors, story, characters, and gameplay?
Yeah, that's a super interesting topic. I think a lot of people GTA has a particular, vibe and identity, right, that goes through every single game. And I think GTA 5, GTA 5 is quite a divisive one in a lot of ways. Like, despite the success and the acclaim and the money that it's made, you often find in a lot of conversations with people, GTA 5 is one that is quite divisive. A lot of people, I found when I put my video out, a lot of people were like, oh, this is my favorite game, I love this game, it's incredible, still holds up. And a lot of other people will be like, oh no, I didn't like this one. Like, GTA 4 is better, San Andreas is better, I didn't really like GTA 5 that much. And I think one of the key things that I think GTA 5 perfects, and I talk about it in my video, but, to talk about it here, is the whole power fantasy of GTA, and the idea that you are fighting back and pushing back against the confines that keep you so boxed in reality. You're able to fight out and push back against that in GTA, and I think it's never done better than it is in 5. The way that Los Santos itself and the countryside of Blaine County and everything feels so genuinely real and authentic. Like, that's a testament to the way Rockstar built their stuff, but the way that it then uses the GTA's base gameplay of you being able to do whatever the hell you want in this world, in such a way that it is the ultimate GTA power fantasy of being able to do whatever the hell you want, whenever you want, in a world that feels so genuinely, real. And I think it's the best thing that GTA 5 does, embodying what GTA is all about, in the most real, authentic, and fun way. And I think a lot of people overlook that for GTA 5. I think a lot of people brush it under the rug, just don't really think about it that much, kind of take it for granted almost.
I suppose so. I mean, now that you say it, that GTA 5 is quite a divisive one, for what it is, that is true. I mean, when it originally came out, everybody was just over the moon. Like, you literally couldn't find a flaw with this game. Same goes for me. And it was almost kind of like it was the social consensus to just automatically say this is the best GTA game ever. But then, I think already 2 years in or something, if anything a few years in, it kind of got to that point where people were looking back at the game and saying, okay, maybe it isn't as perfect as we originally thought. And people really started, going to GTA 4, San Andreas and such for the small details.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always good, I think, to be able to look at something on that large of a scale, on that like amount of success, and to be able to look at it under a more critical lens. I think that's always good to do, but I think in doing so, a lot of people have forgot to really look at what GTA 5 did well and be like, no, that actually is some of the best design or
it is for sure
for a game, like in the games industry.
It is for sure. I mean, I remember, maybe you remember that video, it was like October 2013 or something. IGN did a video like 49 like mind-blowing micro details that even then just proved that Rockstar just invested every dime they had into this game. And that's even crazy considering that it was the last big Xbox 360 PS3 game, and it used, every kilobyte of data available to craft this immensely real world. It's everything from the moon changing overnight to flip-flops flipping and flopping to I don't even remember. So many little things.
Like the sweat accumulating on clothes.
Oh,
You've got the stars being more visible when you go out to the countryside and leave like the light pollution of the city. You've got like the engine like ticking away when you switch it off. Like you can just hear it like slowly sort of like
so many micro details that indeed make the Los Santos and Blaine County feel so real. And I also think that obviously, I think maybe you referenced that a little, but every GTA world, every GTA map is its very own, it's its own vibe. It's its own thing. And GTA 5's is most certainly unique. It's one that I have a lot of fun memories with. But also in terms of when people started looking back to the older games, there is, for me, just still something about Liberty City that Los Santos never quite had.
Yeah, no, I think for me, like, Liberty City is always going to be probably my favourite saying for GTA, and it's my favourite Grand Theft Auto.
It's also nostalgia for me, I think. Like, GTA 4 was the first, like, really modern video game I ever really fell in love with. So, there's a nostalgia alone there.
Yeah, for sure. Same for me. I mean, GTA 4 was the first GTA game that I played. It wasn't, one of the first games that I ever sort of got that invested in, but it was one-off, in sort of like the early days of me really looking at video games through a different lens. And I mean, Rockstar Games will always do that because they're so incredibly detailed and rich. And I think when you then look to GTA 5, I think with GTA 5, what a lot of people, I think because the game is so good, it's then easy to scrutinize it and take the good for granted. Like, there is a lot of great in GTA 5.
Absolutely.
There is so much of it that's just some of the best stuff that we've ever seen, and that hasn't been outdone other than maybe in like Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of your details and your building of your world and things like that. But it's some of the most incredible world design and like game design philosophy that exists out there for open world games, especially for like urban-based open world games.
Absolutely.
And I think that what that does is it allows for, it's this basis, right? You've got all of these incredible details that are in this world, like just tiny little things, the difference in NPCs, the way they'll react to you or not react to you, or the way that you can, see the differences in world between whether you're in, the very south of the map or the very north of the map, the differences are like astronomical. Yeah. And all of that together, and like basic things like road signage or the markings on the road or the way the highways intersect and connect and stuff, all of that stuff works as such a great basis for creating and allowing the player to do what GTA does best, which is like go steal a car, go drive on the pavement, just like escape from the cops on 5-star wanted level. But you're doing it in this world that feels so authentic to reality, and it elevates that GTA fantasy and fun that the basis of the games are built on all the way back, from the very first ones. And I think GTA 5 does that the best out of all of them, and I think it's one of the aspects that people take for granted and overlook, but that's because it's done just so well that people don't even think to be like, oh, this is actually really, really good. It's just like, it's just one of those things that you just sort of take for granted, and you're like, this just is fun, it's just good. And I think it's that's one of the most phenomenal parts, to be honest. For
sure. I remember in terms of what I said with when it got to that point when people really started kind of, nitpicking GTA 5, I remember one thing that people really gave the praise to 4 was the overall physics system, if you recall that. Which, for what it is, I mean, yeah, I suppose 4's physics are much more realistic.
Yeah. There is that element of 4 definitely, I mean, definitely leaned into realism more, right? Like, that's what 4 was sort of trying to do with, like, a very grounded, gritty atmosphere. It was, and that then plays with the game mechanics. It's like, you know, you don't have a lot of the over-the-top stuff that you saw in, like,
San Andreas.
GTA 3 or San Andreas, you know, in the, like, the inclusion of, like, when you get to the highest star wanted level, like, you're not getting tanks coming after you.
Of course
like,
not.
It's always going to, like, it's like you get the SWAT team or whatever, you get helicopters. Like, there's that element that's just, it's small things, but GTA 4 aims for realism a lot more than the others, and I like that. I think that's really cool, and I enjoy that it's baked into the mechanics, like whether it is just, you know, your ragdoll physics or the way that cars move, like to feel a bit more, you know, grounded in sort of like a realistic feel. But it's what 5 then does is it goes, well, we don't need to do all that for GTA. Like, what's really fun about GTA?
You're
is
right.
It realism?
Yeah, 5 is fun.
Maybe not. Yeah. Fun is the core of 5.
You also mentioned earlier it was kind of like every GTA game till then kind of culminating, and I definitely like in terms of gameplay and also in terms of like weapons ultimately. Like when you look at GTA 4, there wasn't really all that fun stuff like parachutes and sticky bombs. All of that didn't really come until the Ballad of Gay Tony, and then in GTA 5, it was just all there. Like, all the fun cars, all the fun skydiving equipment, all the fun practical weapons, just everything is there from the get-go.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with 4, like, don't get me wrong, like, 4 is my favourite one, and there's reasons for that. It's partly because of the way that the things that I like in games the most, like, I've always preferred, like, when you compare Rockstar's franchises, I've always preferred Red Dead. It's just way more my sort of thing than GTA is. But despite that, despite the fact that 4 leans into more of the things that I enjoy, it's impossible for me not to admit or to say that GTA 5 to me is the quintessential GTA experience. It's either that or it's San Andreas. But I think 5 is, it's difficult to say because obviously people have a lot of nostalgia for San Andreas, and I get that, and I understand why, and it is, you know, for a lot of people it is the GTA.
It's amazing.
But I think 5 on a base level, I think it captures what GTA is the very most. I think 5 does that, and it tries to push that and be like, this is the GTA game. And I don't know if GTA 6 will do a better job.
If anything, definitely in terms of gameplay elements and everything just culminating, that's everything from the weapons available to the cars to the gameplay to the everything really. But I always say that in terms of like, I always say that I prefer 4 in terms of like story and ultimately characters too, I think. But 5 is just, of course, gameplay wise wins. And with that, why don't we dive into like the story itself a bit, because one thing that GTA 5 did was really, you know, go from the depressive dark tone of GTA 4 into a much like lighter, almost kind of like buddy action comedy tone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely switched up things in terms of its tone, but what I love about 5 is that it keeps a lot of the cynicism of GTA 4.
Yeah. In what sense?
It very much continues to go, well, you know, we're taking it in a new direction. It's a different tone. You know, we're going, this is way more lighthearted. We're trying to make you laugh a lot more.
And the whole 3 playable characters was very revolutionary at the time for gaming overall.
Yeah, for sure. And that, like, you know, I'm not a big fan of like multiple characters. I always prefer to have just one. But the way that GTA does it in a way that just works. It's very well designed, and I think that's a superb part of it. But I think what I really appreciate in 5 is that despite the tone being different, is that it does keep that same satirical undertones, the same criticism of American society that they do
for sure.
GTA 4.
That's a funny you mentioned that because, I mean, looking at what GTA 5 was parodying at the time, compared to just how much the world has changed in the last decade, is just, it's not even funny. Like, honestly, what GTA 5 was parodying feels like nothing compared to, like, the hell the world has evolved into since, especially in the most recent years.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I always remember, do you remember that, like, Vinewood tour bus, or what it is? Activity?
Remind me.
It was kind of like you can hop on this, like, bus and you drive around Vinewood. Oh, you know, kind of like the real-life Hollywood tours. This and this movie star lives here. And then when you drive by the, what is in real life the Chinese theater in LA, in-game it's called the Oriental Theater. There, the guide literally says, and my daughter says it's not okay to say Oriental anymore, and stuff like that. Which is just like the earliest version of the whole political correctness phenomenon that is really widespread today.
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess that there is that element, but it's one of the things about GTA 5 that for me is interesting to look at or dissect from like a video angle, is the GTA 5, and I think it does have, like, I talk about this in my videos, it's a bit difficult to, like, summarize, but GTA 5 does have something to say. It has a lot of things to say, but at the same time, it criticizes a lot of things from a lot of different angles, and I think they have the, you know, obviously Rockstar being, you know, they have studios everywhere, but not being an American company, obviously, you know, being founded in, it was Scotland, right?
Yeah.
They have the benefit of seeing it from a very much an outsider perspective, because it's always very American focused, and that's the point of GTA. Like, people have always said, oh, what if they said it here or there? It's like, the point of GTA is to be a satire of America. That's sort of the point of it.
Because America is so easy to parody as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's definitely the easiest to go for.
Sure.
With the most that you can say. And I think with GTA 5, there's so many things that they try to parody in this game, and I think it works, and there's a lot of stuff to say, but at the same time it can get a little bit confused. Like, at points they'll be talking about, you know, the push of political correctness, but then, you know, in the next quest maybe they'll be, you know, looking at the systemic racism that's in, you know, the police force, or then maybe the next quest they look at, you know, stuff like immigration, and then, you know, the next one is something else, like celebrity obsession, and then you've got, you know, social media, like people that are so chronically online, like you've got all of these different things, like reality TV, like, there's so much that they do.
Some of it, I suppose, I've never really thought of it that way. I mean, some of it is just there for the sake of parody and having a laugh, while others may be more like social justice conscious, I suppose.
Yeah,
I've never really thought of it that way, necessarily.
GTA, and I think the thing about GTA, and like one of the biggest parts of GTA 5's story is that it constantly comes back around. Well, one of the huge parts is government corruption.
Of course. Yeah, it's like the very foundation of the whole thing. Yeah,
for sure. And then one of the other things that they bring up time and time again is also capitalism. That's one of the huge themes of GTA 5, is this critique of capitalism, but without also, the game also doesn't really suggest an alternative or anything else. It doesn't really give you any sort of like deep critique, but it does keep coming up again and again. But then that, like, it allows you to then into the world of the criminals, their answer to, you know, like Michael will bring up all the time, like, capitalism's fucked, that's why he robs people. Because he's like, well, you know, I'm just going to take advantage of the system that I disagree with for my own benefit, because I'm selfish and because that's what I want to do. And it allows you into their world and to do what they want to do in a way that just enhances the fun. And I think that's kind of the point. Like, GTA doesn't want to say too much, but at the same time, it doesn't want to say nothing either. And I think it tries to balance it.
Yeah, I suppose so. I've got to admit, I've never really thought about all the smaller themes in the story like that. I've always mostly thought of, I suppose, the narrative itself and the characters, which of course are great too. But you are right. There are all those underlying themes. It takes me into I think we should cover, you know, as I call them, the trio themselves for a bit, kind of like the parts of their characters that really worked and stuff, because, like I said, it was such a revolutionary thing to do 3 playable characters at the time. And the way that it blended it and everything worked so smoothly, it just worked.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why it works, at least on like a mechanical level, at least for me, is I hate when there's multiple characters and I have to manage multiple inventories in the same playthrough. And usually, you find it in like your RPGs or your RPG fight sort of games, and they have like different skill trees and things like that. But in GTA, obviously, you don't have any of that, like any of that fluff, any of that bulk to the game. It's just the character, and they have like you have a car for them, or like they have different clothes or a different set of money or whatever, and it just streamlines the whole thing. Like when I switch from Michael to Trevor, I don't have to worry about what skills have I invested, what level is he, like, what gear have I got on him. Like I don't have to worry about any of that shit.
All you really need to
switch the character. I just let me loose, let me go sort of thing.
All you really need to worry about is, okay, I haven't bought this rifle as this character yet. I'll just drive to the nearby ammunition and I'll do that, no problem. And then each character have their own, unique set of clothes, unique set of their special ability, of course, their unique tattoos and all that stuff. And each character really, there is something about playing as each character, even if it's just for like an open world session.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what I found, on my replay, was that when I was playing as a particular character, I changed the way that I interacted with the world. Like, when you play as Michael, for example, or Franklin, if you come across like a random event where someone's like got their purse stolen or whatever, like if I was Franklin, for example, I would go and I would stop the thief and I'd return the item, get a little reward, have a little interaction. If I was Trevor, like I wasn't going to do that. Like I was just going to like either ignore it, or I was going to mow them both down with a truck or something.
Trevor's like, Trevor, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It just changes the way you interact with things, like on a subconscious level. And I think that's quite interesting.
For sure, and that reminds me, like, from a story perspective, is that Trevor, I think, of the 3, he is undoubtedly, like, the most mysterious character of them, and because, you think of him as just this, like, psychopath, cannibal, whatever he is, but there are parts of the story where you really see that he is not just that. Especially, I think, towards the middle of the game, there's the whole thing with Madrazo and Patricia living in the trailer.
Yeah.
Where you really, that's the first time you really see, I suppose, the more human side of Trevor.
Yeah. It's one of the things I really loved about revisiting the game was realizing that Trevor is so much deeper than I ever gave him credit for on my first playthrough. I was obviously, 16 at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I wasn't really thinking about these things, it just sort of went over my head, but replaying it, Trevor is such a deep character. There's so much to him, like the insecurities, like the abuse he obviously went through, like the troubles he has mentally, but also like he has this deep loyalty. Like out of the 3 characters, like he's the
I was just about to say that.
He's the most predictable.
Yeah.
He's the most unpredictable while being the most predictable too. Like. He is such a loyal and like good-hearted person, whilst also being the most dangerous as well.
Yeah.
And it makes it so interesting to explore him, especially juxtaposed to someone like Michael, that outwardly seems like,
very cool
the
guy,
man,
but
good guy.
He's
really
willing.
He's a piece of shit.
He's willing. It makes me think that of the 3, Trevor is the one who is the most loyal, who is the least likely to stab someone he knows in the back for personal gain. Whereas, I mean, I think it is considered that ending C is canon, but you still do have the choice to stab, to go kill Trevor or Michael, which proves that Franklin would do that if it came to saving his own ass. Where Trevor could never do that, and that's why even 9 years later he goes off on Michael any chance he gets to just say, "You stabbed me in the back," and that was not okay.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, he won't ever like. I remember thinking when he confronts Michael, I'm like, why doesn't anything happen? Why are they just mates again? I'm like, it's because Trevor, like, he can't betray like his friend. Doesn't matter how much his friend betrays him. He can't do it back because he just is loyal. He has that loyalty in him.
I suppose so.
It's so interesting.
I mean, things do a little messy towards like the end of the game with their standoff in North Yankton and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
for sure.
But then he comes back, and that is basically where the Michael and Trev are like children, and Frank, he's like the youngest, but clearly the oldest of them. They're constantly having to break up their bickers. But yeah, I think overall, it was just some really interesting protagonists that the game introduced and had. And also, like, there were just a lot of interesting characters in the game. Also, like, some quite memorable side characters and stuff. Of course, you have Lester, who's a bit odd, maybe, at points, but he's kind of like, the mastermind.
Interesting character.
And then,
he works well to sort of to tie the three together, like in a purpose, and I like that. But there's also the history there between Michael and Trevor, and it also allows Franklin this in as well by having Lester be this glue almost between the three of them, at least at the start.
Sure, I think a character that kind of gets maybe overlooked a bit to kind of being a good guy in some ways is Dave Norton, actually. The trio, especially Trevor, kind of always hated him for the whole Brad thing and all that, and even Michael was very tired of him at points. And he did get a little annoying at points, maybe. That was probably mostly due to Steve Haynes being, the boss. But when it came to it, Dave really wanted what was best for Michael and the others.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because obviously you have those different facets of the American government.
Yeah.
With characters like Steve Haynes and then Dave Norton as well.
Steve was always... You wanted to shoot him the second you saw him.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. He's definitely the one you're supposed to be, that you're supposed to hate the most. But then you've got someone like Dave, where there's a bit more nuance there of like, you can understand him, like you understand him from the perspective of like he does have the character's backs, but at the same time he also did work with Michael to do that thing with Brad and like to ultimately betray Trevor in North Yankton, and then it's just like it plays into that whole thing. And I think that's one of the largest parts of like that whole sort of story arc between them, is there's quite a lot of nuance there that it makes it interesting to explore, whilst also being able to talk about, not just the characters and their own sort of their own reasoning behind why they did what they did or reacted the way they did, like with Trevor, but also to play again into the idea of the way the government uses or allies themselves with criminals in order to commit certain things or do certain things that maybe are outside of what the general public would see the government as having the rights to do.
Of
sort
course.
Of thing.
It makes me...
I quite like that.
It reminds me of that like little conversation in the final mission, like when they are talking about like who do we need to go and kill now. Trevor suggests Dave Norton, but Michael is not. We can't kill him. We need him alive so nobody fucks with us afterwards.
Yeah. For sure.
And that it makes me think that, like, in terms of antagonists, I suppose there wasn't really one central antagonist in this game, I suppose.
Not in a traditional sense, for sure.
Not in the sense along the lines of, like, Dmitry Raskolov, like the guy who, from the very beginning, fucks you over completely and only, pisses you off more and more with the game, and then killing him in the end is just, he had it coming. Like, everybody who is kind of an antagonist or you kill in the end is, like, don't really become bad until the end and aren't introduced till, like, the middle of the game. Devin Weston, I suppose, is like the primary guy, if it was.
What I think GTA 5 does a lot more, like GTA 4 is so much more of a... Nico is the hero, Dimitri is the villain, like, there's nuance to it, but it's very obvious you've got that. But I think with GTA 5, like, our protagonists are never framed as heroic people. They're always, like, they are criminals, they're bad people, like, they suck, really, ultimately. But we're on their side because we're on their side, that's the perspective that we're from. So you see people like Dave Norton through the eyes of Michael, and you're like, yeah, you're right, we do need him, like, we see him as an asset, not an enemy, whereas you look at Steve Haynes and Devin Weston, and it's sort of like, yeah, those guys, when you get rid of them. Why do we want to get rid of them? Well, it's because we're in the mindset of these three criminals that want to get rid of them. Like, we see it we're not seeing it from an outside, impartial perspective where, if these were real people, there's no way I would be on the side of Michael, for example. Like, in real life, I wouldn't.
Probably not. No.
In game, I am, and I'm like, yeah, like, I get it. Let's fucking do this. It makes sense, and I think the game does a great job of putting you in the perspective of the protagonists without making the protagonists like just these really heroic good guys. They're still bad guys, but they make you.
Thieves
you're
with honor,
anyway.
I suppose. Some sort of honor.
Yeah, I think so, and I think to an extent, like, there's that. Like, I said this in my video, but I think Michael is definitely the most unlikable of the three. I feel he's the one that he will just betray you if it benefits him. He doesn't seem to have much loyalty. He's a hypocrite in a lot of ways.
He's not exactly a family guy either. I was just thinking.
No, yeah, like, he just sucks. Like, he's just like a piece of shit, to be honest.
Yeah, like the way he smashes his son's TV, and admittedly his family is pretty flawed, especially like the first half of the game. I always say that, like, the entire GTA 5 story technically wouldn't have happened if Amanda hadn't fucked the tennis coach.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I mean, then they wouldn't have pulled Madrazo's house down, and that wouldn't have caught the attention of the FIB again, and that wouldn't have led to the jewel store job, and so on, so on.
Yeah, true. But I also think as well, there's an element of, like, inevitability with Michael. Like, he was always going to do this again. He was always going to, get back into the heist business again because he loves it. Like, he can't help it. And this was just an excuse. If it didn't happen now, it would have happened in a year, 2 years. It would have happened eventually, sort of thing.
I suppose so.
Which I think sort of adds to his whole story arc and what we go through with him, of him, sort of, at least sort of trying to admit it to himself. But at the same time, sort of also doesn't either. Like, there's that, when he gets back with his family and stuff, it's this sense of, I think he admits to himself who he is, but he doesn't say it out loud, and he's just like, let's just slip back into complacency.
What is it?
And just keep being who I am.
It's that mission, like, he falls asleep on the couch, and Jimmy comes back home, and he just gives it to him straight, like, you're a miserable piece of shit dad who drinks too much and doesn't know, like, how to be a family man. And Michael is just like, that just might be the sweetest thing anybody's ever said to me. And after that, I suppose his family does become a bit more likable. I still think, like, especially Tracy, she's basically like a parody of, I suppose, the basic LA white girl. Just like really pretending to live this perfect social media life and all that stuff. Hanging out with mysterious types and such.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see a different angle to his family by that point in the game. It's one of my, I think, at least, like, Michael's family and that whole aspect is probably one of my, like, least favourite parts of the game. I just find it to be just a bit, it leaves me a bit wanting. I'm like, I'm not really sure what the game is trying to do with this. Like,
it kind of proves that, also in terms of his ability to stab others in the back, is that he is ultimately the one with the most to lose.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And he even says that in, like, the flashbacks and stuff, like, Trevor, I did it for my family. It was nothing personal.
Yeah.
But we had to get out.
Yeah, it's that. You can understand why he did it. But then you flip then to Trevor and you're like, Trevor understands why he did it, he just hates that he did it.
Of course.
And there's that whole element. I think it's just that GTA 5 doesn't ever solidify, and I think it's maybe a positive of the game, is that the game doesn't solidify a point with each character necessarily. It allows you to sort of dwell on the different angles that you can view them from. And there's not like with Nico, it's very much Nico is he's a good guy, he means well, he sometimes does the wrong things. Like, you're with him for the whole game, so you're supposed to have like a concrete view of him. Whereas with Michael, Trevor, and Franklin, I think it's a lot more like the game just lets you figure it out. It's like, here's a bunch of different ways you can view them. You make up your mind what you think of them. We're not going to tell you what to think. And I quite like that, actually.
I suppose so. I think the final character to touch upon before we move towards wrap up the gameplay aspect a bit is Lamar, of course, who is, I suppose, a big secondary character as well.
I really like the way Lamar is utilized, especially for Franklin. I think he's a very grounding character, right?
He is indeed.
Keeps him remembering his roots, but also there's an element of you can cling to your roots too much to the point where you're not allowing yourself to spread your wings and move on to something you might actually want to do, which is very clear. Franklin doesn't want to stay, in the hood forever. He doesn't want to stay with these gang members forever. He wants to do more.
Sure, he wants a better life, and they kind of just reminded me of CJ and Sweet a bit, in the sense that Sweet is always the guy who's like, I mean, the second he gets out of prison towards the end of the game is, I need to go back to the hood right now. And CJ's like, oh, we got a mansion now. We got a stake in a casino. Like, I have a good life now. I have money. Where Sweet is just like, you never quite, understood what it's about. Like, you're always only looking out for yourself. And for what it is, Lamar isn't as bad, but it is kind of the same mentality. I mean, when Franklin has been out pulling scores with Michael, suddenly, being set for life in a day, Lamar is all like, why aren't you sharing it with us? Are you forgetting your homies?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that Lamar, there's a quest in the game where you have Lamar and Trevor with Franklin, and Franklin
those are quite fun missions.
They're great fun, but you've got Franklin says to Lamar, he's like, you and Trevor are so similar, which is very true. Lamar is a very loyal person too. He always wants the best for Franklin, but he also is worried that Franklin's going to leave him behind too. And Trevor felt that same way and feels that same way about Michael. And you've got this push and pull then with Franklin, where he's almost going in the direction that Michael went, where he's thinking more about himself. He's not worrying about his old friends from his old home. He's chasing the money, chasing the high of going on these heists and stuff, and learning more from Michael. But then when Trevor gets introduced into the story, it allows for a lot more of a grounding element to hit Franklin, and it wakes him up to what Lamar's saying too. And Franklin then at the end sort of lands in between. He doesn't go all the way back to his roots, but he also doesn't go crazy down the path Michael went down of betraying all his friends and stuff. And that's really what Ending C does for Franklin and for all the characters. Is Franklin sees the issues that they went through and is like, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do something different, and we're going to. And
for what it is, Lamar says in that mission, you're actually doing something for your homies for a change. Hell yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
And why didn't you just say we were killing Devin West and he still ain't paid me?
Yeah.
And he has a minor role in that mission. I think overall, there's just so many great characters. We're definitely forgetting some, but we can always come back to it. I wanted to talk a little bit about more the gameplay itself and just what your favorite story missions were, because one thing I think GTA 5 did was cut out the filler missions, if that makes sense. Because you had that a lot in the early games where it's a mission you can literally complete in 3 minutes. It's literally just drive from here to there and that's the mission. GTA 5 really had none of that. Every mission had a shootout or an awesome driving sequence or something. It really felt like an action movie, each mission. It was so action-packed.
Yeah, no, I think GTA 5 has some really great set pieces. I mean, the heists are all fantastic.
The heists and just some of the,
very good.
in-between missions. There are so many of them that that I've replayed multiple times just because they're so fun. Ones that come to mind immediately are Minor Turbulence, if you remember that one, where you fly the crop duster into the cargo plane.
Mm-hmm. That's a great one.
And
for sure.
I think I actually remember the names of all the missions if you describe them to me and stuff. So
that's wild. I definitely couldn't, but I've only played the game twice.
There's
once
also
in 2013, once through the years.
Sure. Even then, in full, I've only played the story, let me think, I think 4 times, but then, I've also replayed some of the missions individually so many times.
Right, yeah.
And it's even early on that, the really big missions are introduced, where in, GTA 4, you wouldn't get those until, 20, 30 missions in, and you had gotten to Algonquin and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Where it really kicks it straight off the bat here.
Yeah, for sure. 5 definitely keeps the pacing going, keeps it up, it keeps every mission interesting and in a different way, and I think that's something that's in intrinsically GTA. Like, it's what makes GTA GTA is that the excitement of every mission being bigger than the last, every mission doing something new, interesting, creative, action-packed. Like, it's part of what makes GTA GTA. Like, you know, I think my biggest criticism with GTA, or GTA 5 specifically, and the way some of its missions can be, is like, you talked about that crop duster one, which is a great mission. Like, that whole sequence with the plane and everything is great. But it does have you follow the cargo plane for like a solid 5 to 10 minutes.
I suppose so, sure.
And it's like, some of GTA 5 has those elements where I'm like, we could have cut down some of the fat a little bit.
Maybe.
In some areas. Which is maybe my biggest criticism.
I suppose so, but then again, I would say that was kept to a minimum in terms of like filler stuff during missions. There's also
it's a lot better than it could have been, for sure.
There was also you definitely remember that one. That was Caida Libre, the Madrazo mission, basically where everything goes to shit afterwards because Trevor gets the clever idea of kidnapping his wife.
Yeah.
That was such a fun mission. Shooting down the plane and just driving the dirt bike cross country.
Yeah, that's a banger. That's a great mission.
And then, of course, you said the heist missions themselves are definitely the highlights.
I love the one on the fucking where you go to the FIB building and you end up. It obviously depends what route you take, right? But the one where you end up rappelling off the side.
Oh, the Bureau raid. Yeah. I always went with that one. As opposed to the fireman crew.
Yeah.
And for the big one, the big score in the end, what approach do you usually go with?
Well, I like subtle approaches. So I went with the approach where you disguise yourselves as the
guards,
the guys with the trucks. Yeah, you go in, you grab the thing, it goes off without a hitch. You do get into a fight, a car chase, as you're taking the goal and driving away and stuff, but I'm a big fan of doing things quietly. That's how I always choose to play games if I can.
I always thought with that, actually, that this mission, this is the big one. This is too good to, like, just do. Like, we need it to be memorable. We need to have a good gunfight. We need to, have 5 stars and escape the cops and everything just to, like, we fucking did it. So I always did the obvious approach for that one.
Yeah, no, I get it. That makes a lot of sense. I think most people probably choose that because, it's GTA.
It's also a bigger payout. Much bigger payout. I think usually for the subtle approach, you'll only go with like 17 mil or something. Where like if you choose the right crew members and stuff, you can get like 35 or something with the obvious approach. Like, you don't really need a good gunman for that, and there is, if you remember her, I think it was Taliana Martinez, the pilot, that you can get in, like, from one of the random events, who's, like, the most skilled of them, and she only takes a 5% cut.
That's good. That's one of the things I love about these heists, too, is the whole setup aspect of it, where you can choose your different crew members.
I think you mentioned that in your video as well, Packy McCreary, the inclusion of him, which is such a nice detail, especially, in the Polito score, him talking about what is probably the best mission in GTA 4, 3-Leaf Clover.
Yeah, the heist.
Yeah, iconic mission. And the Polito score itself was such a fun mission, just like storming through in those like juggernaut suits with the minigun, and there was so many fun missions, both for like the main story missions and then even some of the stranger missions, and just like overall open world gameplay activities. There was so much to do, and that's one thing I feel like GTA 5 does that I've never really seen in another game, is that you can decide to go for 100% completion, which is fairly easy compared to most other games as well, and afterwards there will literally be so many things to do still.
Yeah.
Like, you can
that's just the way, Rockstar build a lot of their stuff out, is... it's very nice.
But I wouldn't even say that has any really been in, like, GTA 4 or any other games. Like, you do 100% completion, and then you've kind of cleared the map of things to do.
Yeah, true. I think maybe it's more thinking towards something like, I suppose Red Dead obviously does it in the way that you can do 100% completion, but there's always going to be stuff.
Sure.
happening. Like, the map doesn't feel totally empty, right? And I mean, yeah, GTA 5 does that, and it's got that element of it just sort of exists as, like, you know, independent of you too, and I think that makes it adds to that whole feel of the open world space, which is really nice.
The first time I did 100% completion was like, it was only like a month and a half after the game originally came out, and I remember after that, you know, there were, like, I hadn't even done a fraction of everything there was to do. You know, there was still the Epsilon program, there were all the Trevor's and Michael's Strangers and Freaks missions, because you only need Franklin's for 100%. There were like at least a dozen more like types of collectibles, and there is like, and even if it's one of those, I think you mentioned that in your video too, it's one of those maps where you can just get in your car, put on like Los Santos Rock radio, and like drive down the highway.
Yeah.
And just do
it
that.
Feels good.
Yeah. I'd love to do that sometimes. But there was so many cool, and also with the next gen upgrade, I don't know if you did any of those like specific side missions that were included there.
I didn't know it was a thing.
There was everything from like, I've never even done some of them myself. There was everything from like I think it was like the monkey mosaic collectibles to like there was this murder mystery thing as well to everything.
That's crazy. That completely slipped me by. I had no clue.
Which took you to like some of the darker parts of the map and stuff. Speaking of the map, I think you mentioned that earlier, is that even to this day, you know, Los Santos and Blaine County have got to be one of the most iconic maps of all time in its scale, and I bet there's so much of it I've never discovered, even to this day, especially with the underwater part.
Yeah, for sure. I reckon the map like has all these little corners you've probably just never been to, like little areas where you're like, I don't think I've ever stood here before, like in this particular spot.
And especially when it comes to the underwater, I think you mentioned that as well. Like really going deep and like kind of feeling kind of claustrophobic and like, wow, where is the daylight?
It's got a great atmosphere to it, and I
absolutely.
Think that, I mean, as far as the map goes, like as a whole map, like I said this before, but I think the way how it's built is definitely the most realistic urban environment in a video game. Like it's like no doubt about it, to be honest. Like just the way that roads connect, the way that the road markings are, the signage, like it feels like I think a lot of people take it for granted that it feels like a genuinely real city, and obviously it's based on LA, but it's still fictional and they've done their own thing with it. So being able to craft a space that feels like a genuine real city is really impressive.
If anything, I actually prefer Los Santos over the real life LA in terms of size. I promise you, I've been to LA once and it's a fucking nightmare when you don't have a car.
Yeah, no, I bet.
Yeah, it's wild. Anyway, I feel like we can always come back to this aspect. I wanted to talk a little about, of course, the game's legacy, of course, if we haven't covered it a bit already, but it's like, how did the GTA franchise and open world gaming overall evolve for this game?
I think as far as GTA is, it's interesting because you look at a game like The Witcher 3, for example, and what that game did altered a lot of games moving forward. Like, you look at the Horizon franchise,
set the standards and stuff.
And I think it's interesting when you look at that aspect, or that as an example, when you look at The Witcher and the way that it influenced video games moving forward. But then when you look at GTA, GTA obviously had a large impact on open world games with earlier in their sort of life cycle, but GTA 5, I never felt like any game really tried to even replicate or mimic or do anything close to GTA 5. And the same with Red Dead. I've never felt that Red Dead has tried to be replicated either, which is interesting because a lot of big games have impact on games where there'll be a lot of copycats, a lot of things following. And I've never felt that GTA 5 had any real competitors. Like, you have Saints Row, but they kind of strayed away. Like, you've got a lot of older games that compete with maybe GTA 4 and San Andreas sort of thing. But with 5,
Yeah,
I've never felt that it really, like, GTA 5 is its own thing, and people don't really touch it.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say, and I've said that on in previous episodes, is that for a long time, Rockstar were always the ones who like set the standard for open world games. If they practically didn't invent it to some degree, with like GTA 3 way back then, like over 20 years ago, and they always like one up themselves. Always set the standards we have to beat are our own. You know, you had GTA 3, then you had Vice City, then you had San Andreas, which was the biggest thing of all time. Then you had 4, and then you had 5, then you have Red Dead 2. Like, they're always, like, beating their own standards.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It's always themselves that they're trying to compete with, really.
And GTA 5, if anything, is just, it's probably the most iconic video game of all time, and just one of the most iconic pieces of overall media. Like, what was it?
One of the one of, if not the biggest.
It made $1 billion in, what was it, a day or something? And it was everywhere in the news. Like, of course not like conservative-oriented news who, like, are scared about video games and stuff. But, like, most neutral media outlets and stuff would talk about it. Like, even those who never report on video games, just because it was such a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, it was huge. It was the biggest game. It still remains one of, if not the biggest game.
Like what game?
You know, Minecraft, Fortnite. It's one of those huge names. That if you've never touched a video game in your life, odds are you know about GTA 5.
For sure. I mean, there are other games that kind of more or less have the same status, like Red Dead Redemption 2, Assassin's Creed 2, like you said, The Witcher 3, kind of like those games that are just like essential video game history titles. But then again, none of those has anything against GTA 5.
No, definitely not. Like, if you're in the gaming space, you know, those are names you know of. Obviously, The Witcher 3, Assassin's Creed 2, like, you know of those games. But if you're not in the video game space, there aren't many that, like, when I think, like, what I try to measure it to is, like, if I were to talk to my grandparents about video games, I'm like, they have no idea what Assassin's Creed is, right? But they know what GTA is.
For sure.
And it's that crazy, like, it breaks out of the bounds of its own medium in terms of its fame, and that's quite insane.
I think, in short, that, like, you know, the GTA franchise, I don't even know if I want to say it evolved. It definitely evolved with this game, but then again, it took just everything up to that point, crammed it into one, and made something truly unique. And and it set the standards for open world gaming going forward. That, like, everybody knew we are never going to make something like this. And the game's legacy here a decade later, like, speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think that one of the key aspects, especially of its legacy and how it's remembered, is that GTA 4 was something different. It was a different take on GTA, whereas GTA 5 is they look at the base. What does Grand Theft Auto mean? Let's make that game in the modern age, and that's what GTA 5 is. It's the fundamentals of what makes GTA what it is, dialed up and made into a modern game, and that's, you know, I think why it was so successful and why it's so remembered and revered.
For sure. I mean, yeah, for sure. I think, slowly moving towards the finale, I wanted to hear your take on this. Are you disappointed the otherwise planned story mode expansion was cancelled? And what would you have wanted it to have consisted of?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I would say when it was first announced that we were probably going to be getting a single-player expansion and then it didn't happen, I was probably disappointed then. I was like, oh man, this sucks. A decade later, though, I think I'm pretty content with the game that we got, the story that was told, and where it ended. I don't necessarily need one. I mean, I think I'm in the minority when it comes to this, but usually I like less of a thing. I always get worried if there's more of a thing, there's more chance for it to get bad and be ruined. So
that's interesting.
With something like GTA 5, I'm like, I really like the story they told. I really like where it ends, and I'm like, would a DLC have helped that? Maybe not, but could it have been good? Yeah, definitely.
For sure. I mean, we did cover this specific thing in an earlier episode, but of course for the 10-year here, it would be obvious to cover again, and a lot has happened since then as well. We, among other things, we had, I forget the name of it, that online update with Franklin and Lamar, for example, which
I did see that,
I think what has happened is that originally back in 2014 there, when Rockstar told us that there was going to be an expansion of the trio story coming, I was of course excited because I loved the story mode. It was at that time where like story mode was hot for 2 weeks, and then online came and everything was about that, and new players to the game, like they completed the prologue maybe and then they just skipped directly to online, which for a long time was like, you are missing out, brother, on one of the like coolest single player modes of all time. For what it is, I think really that was when the Lamar roasts Franklin meme suddenly resurged. That was really when story mode became cool again. If not playing that, just the characters and like the overall feel of it, like the tone of it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. It's a shame that what happened with GTA 5 was that the online became so prominent that it just overshadows the single player in a lot of ways. Like when people think about GTA 5, they often think about the online first. The single player is like this separate thing that people don't really talk about anymore, or even think about. At least, from what I see a lot of the time. So it's a bit of a shame in that regard, because it means that, the single player DLC that could have happened got shafted for what ends up being these, minor appearances from people like Franklin and Lamar.
So many great characters. Gay Tony as well, and Laszlo, and even just like characters from like GTA 4 and stuff.
Yeah. And it's always interesting to see that, but then there's the part of me that's like, well, you could have done so many cool single player things with these.
You definitely
concepts.
Could. I always say that what could have been really cool is that it would have been a continuation, let's say set 5 or 10 years later after the main game. Like, everybody's a bit older now, a bit wiser, and the trio has kind of grown apart, but then, like, something from the past, maybe even like Michael and Trevor's distant past, comes back to haunt them, and, the gang needs to get back together.
Yeah, maybe. It's one of those things where I couldn't. There's nothing I can particularly envisage where I'm like, that is what would happen or what could be the single player DLC.
But
because I don't know. I'm really unsure as to what I would.
Yeah.
The way I would see that playing out.
Then again, you said something which I haven't really thought of it that way before, but for what it is, GTA 5's story is perfectly good the way it was. Like, it starts on this note, it ends on a satisfactory note. And a continuation, for what it is, as cool as it would have been to see, might just have been an unnecessary sequel.
Yeah, and I think, there's some things that you get a DLC and you're like, oh, this has made the thing better. And that could have happened with GTA 5.
For sure. It was something else with GTA 4, for example, where it really wasn't a continuation, but rather a spin-off. Like, some of the cutscenes, we had already seen those, we had seen the characters that we were now playing as before and stuff. And it really just showed Nico's story from other angles.
Yeah, and I loved seeing, Johnny and obviously, what's the other one's name?
Luis.
Luis, that's the one, of course.
Speaking of Johnny, that was playing that mission, Mr. Phillips. That was like, what just happened? Is he dead? Did I just kill Terry and Clay, who are like such cool people? And did Johnny just go down like a total punk?
I mean, there's a wild way to introduce Trevor.
Of course.
I think that's, very bold of them to do. I'm all for it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I love the way they did story DLC for GTA 4. I think it was really well handled. I don't know whether GTA 5 could have done something similar. I feel like the way to go probably would have been a continuation. But
probably,
10 years later, when I look at the whole thing 10 years later, I'm like, I'm kind of content with what GTA 5 is. I think the story, like you said, started on one note, ended on another. It's pretty perfect in what it tries to do, and I'm happy with it. I think I'm very content that we didn't get story DLC 10 years later. If you asked me 5 years ago, I'd probably have been like, it's such a shame. I would have loved to have seen this or that or whatever. But
I think so. I mean, I won't say that the resurgence that like story mode's popularity and the characters have had in the last 2 years or something has necessarily been a good substitute for it, but at least it does like prove that story mode is not totally forgotten. Like there is still like a pop cult aspect of it. Like some of the memes and stuff are still very out there.
Yeah.
If anything, for the fact for like Franklin to be added to online as a playable character is, I've never played those missions, but I mean, it just solidifies those characters' legacy.
Yeah, I think so, and I think as well, like, with the 10-year anniversary, with us talking about this, I think a lot of people are probably talking about the story a little bit more. Like, I think this, it'll bring it back into people's minds. Like, 10 years later, 10 years on, like, reflecting on that. I mean, that's why I wanted to make my video on the whole thing, the story mode alone, like, not even really touching on the online. It's nice to revisit it.
Of course, and for what it is, like, story mode is still just my favorite. Like, I haven't played GTA 5 in a long time, but I always think of returning to the story mode, maybe doing another story playthrough, rather than I do... It's been a while since I played GTA Online with flying motorcycles and laser guns and alien spandex suits and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
I've not played online. God, when was the last time I played online? It must have been like 2015.
Wow.
Like, I've really not played online for a long time, and I'll probably never play it again, to be honest. It's not for me.
That's totally cool. I'm thinking that we could, I think, literally do, I don't know, 3 more episodes just on this game. But here for the end, I wanted to just get nostalgic a bit and talk about how do you remember, like, around this time 10 years ago, like, the last stretch of road to the game and then the release itself. How do you remember that time?
Oh man, yeah, it was an interesting time. I mean, I talk a bit about in my video, like, about the nostalgic aspect of what my life was like at the time. But 2013 was like a super transitional period in my life. So remembering, like, revisiting GTA 5 this year was a really interesting thing because it took me all the way back because I've not played the game since it came out. So it took me all the way back to that, remembering the hype and the anticipation. Like, I was going into, like, starting on my A levels at school. I was, getting my results for my GCSEs and shit. And I just remember it was a very, like, it was both super exciting because I was so excited for GTA 5. That was, like, a large part of, like, my life at that time. But then there was also this added, like, layer of stress from school. And I remember both of those things, but then I remember, like, when GTA 5 came out, like, being able to just escape from all of that. Like, GTA 5 was a huge escape from the stress that I was going through with school, grades, and exams, and all of that stuff. And I think I'll always remember that. Like, GTA 5, like, has that nostalgia factor for me because it was the exact game I needed at the time when it came out. And I think it's that for a lot of people too, and I'll always remember that.
Absolutely, there's so much, like, just nostalgia for me from that time as well. It's something that even now, like, I'm 24 now, but I can just always look back on that so fondly and really just remember, like, when you were still a kid and had nothing to worry about other than just be excited for this thing. I just remember, like, it was all that, me and my friends at school were talking about from when we came back from, like, summer break. Like, that was the beginning of August, and there was still, like, another month or so to go. It was all we talked about. Just, like, making plans for September 17th release date, like, how are we going to do it and stuff. I was still a young GTA fan at the time. Like, I had only, like, given GTA 4 a proper go, like, 9 months earlier or something. Getting into it there. But, I was just hooked from instantly, and I was, leading up to it, I was, like, 100%ing GTA 4 and just kind of ultimately not saying goodbye, but until next time to that masterpiece of a game, which was its thing. And then just like September 17th was a spectacular day.
Yeah.
I just remember like in the big break, like we would get on our bikes, go to the local GameStop, and just like get our copies so we could go directly home afterwards and just play.
It was very exciting. It was super exciting. Like, I can't remember being quite that hyped for a game in my life, to be honest. It was a crazy time. Like, everyone was talking about it. It was everywhere. Like, it was, you see the poster on bus stops. Like,
it was everywhere.
Like, in the middle of town, and just, you couldn't escape it. Like,
of course
YouTube
not.
videos, like, 50 things to be excited for in GTA 5 or whatever. And, like, I'd sit there watching those, like, being like, oh my god, this game's gonna be the best thing ever.
And then when it was out, like, and you were actually playing this, it felt kind of surreal.
Yeah, definitely.
Just like doing that prologue, seeing that opening screen, Ludendorff, North Yank to 9 years ago, and suddenly you're in it. That felt unreal.
It was like, finally, I'm playing this game I've just waited for so long, and it's one of those rare times where a game actually delivers on the hype.
It was, like you just mentioned, in terms of looking forward to it, it was the first like video game release I was there for. There have been games since that I want to say just as excited for, and the Road 2 were just as cool. Red Dead 2, for example. But nothing will beat GTA 5. Like, the nostalgia, like the place I was in at the time, just the game itself, nothing will ever beat that. Yeah,
it's a very, very unique experience, and one that I'll definitely remember forever. Every time I revisit that game, it'll come flooding back to how I felt at the time. It's a special game.
Just that whole time, it's just, like I said, still something I look back on very fondly, even to this day. So, I feel like I said, we could do this for more and more hours, but I feel like we've covered the essentials.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, we've forgotten anything, we know what it is. So, yeah. But if that was everything, I just want to thank you all for listening to this special episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. Stay up to date on everything happening here on GTABase and more things Rockstar. Links to our social media as well as James's channel can be found down below. Once again, thanks for listening. I hope to see you all for the next episode coming very soon, where we will be looking back at this game's revolutionary online mode, GTA Online, with that also turning 10. And of course, thank you, James, for joining me. It was so much fun, and it was great to talk again. Hope you had fun.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime. And that sums up this episode. Stay safe and active, everyone. See you later, Rockstars. Keep on rocking.